Great.
Okay. So I'd like to call the order of the Climate Protection Working Group meeting on Tuesday, March the 12th at 2:03 p.m. And I'll just start with our land acknowledgement. On Tuesday, March the 12th, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. Before settlers arrived, this territory was subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee nations to peacefully share and care for resources. After settlers arrived, it became subject to the three-figure wampum belt last carried by Algonquin elder William Commanda, which commemorates the sharing of this land with English, French, and Indigenous nations under the governance of natural law. We recognize with gratitude the knowledge Smiths Falls and contributions that the Algonquin people bring to the municipality of Smiths Falls. Today, Smiths Falls is also home to other Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. Okay, so we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda? No? Okay. So we will adopt the agenda as is, and
Yeah, a mover and a seconder.
I do need. Okay, so we'll have a mover of that, Nate, seconded by Peter. Motion carried.
Revote.
Revoked.
You said all in favor.
Oh, all in favor.
Yeah.
Okay, and then motion carried.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And now we'll move on to item number 3, adoption of minutes. Were there any amendments to the minutes from February 13th?
No, so they're as is.
Perfect. So we will, I'm recommending motion that the minutes at the last minute on March the 12th or February the 13th be approved as circulated. Can I have that? Nate, moved by Nate, seconded by Sue.
Yeah.
All in favor? Perfect. And motion carried.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to number 4, disclosure of monetary interest. Do we have any disclosures at this time? Okay, so none noted. Thank you. And we'll move on to number 5, priority issues. And number 1 is the report of the updated communication strategy climate action plan.
Okay. Doesn't show everything. Interesting. Okay, so we'll go through the communication plan first. The communication plan essentially is just a framework for how we would be communicating with the public for the climate action plan. I'm only bringing it now to the committee for information, just to know that we have it, and whenever we reach a milestone touch point, it'll be brought up again to just address the fact that we're at a new milestone. So right now we're nearing the end. We're almost done milestone 1, so that is why we're bringing up the communication plan right now to address how we would be moving forward with the rollout for the survey, for example. So that would be something that would happen at the end of milestone 1 and beginning of milestone 2. So that's a piece of the communication that would be discussed in the communication plan. For the next steps, what the communication plan will show would be finalizing the external stakeholders, and it would be moving forward with creating a climate protection working group page on the town page, so that whenever we would refer to information that the public can refer to, it'd be on the town page, as well as the survey that would be beginning at milestone 2. You guys have any questions, or we can just move on to the next one?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
In terms of the order that we go about doing this, I can't help feeling that approaching the public before we've created a menu of options is we're not setting ourselves up for a productive conversation. Like if all we're doing is asking people big picture, how do you feel about the idea of fighting climate change? It's not I wonder, is this order of operations written in stone, or can we work on options for mitigating and then circle back to talking to the public?
So my idea is that we would have a menu of options for mitigating climate change that the community would feel would be feasible, and that would be part of the menu selection. It wouldn't be an exhaustive list, but it'd be rather general in the beginning, just so that we can sort of build information that will go into milestone 3. So the data collected from the survey would help us figure out what the community would be more amenable to in terms of reducing climate change. So it wouldn't just be just the general, this is the Climate Action Protection Plan and what do you feel about it, but more specific questions.
Okay, so like you do want to say like we're gonna reduce in one way versus another way and kind of.
Yes.
Okay, lovely.
So the issue that what I'm struggling with right now is that I'm trying to, I don't know if the feedback is coming from there. I'm not sure. So what is the survey number 2 is that I'm trying to figure out how to, one, communicate the information that the public can understand, and just to create a menu of options that is not necessarily too overwhelming in terms of a survey, because I don't really want it to be a really long survey. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of what I'm at right now, trying to figure out how best to package this information in a survey that's digestible.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just talk to this issue? So historically, it's been fairly common for governments to develop a draft plan and then go to the public. And it's at that point, then you're looking for rubber stamping, you know? When I did the plan in Tay Valley Township, we went to the public really early with a survey. And then we also did consultations with them. And it's twofold. One is to actually collect some data, but the other is to start to engage the public in the whole notion that we're doing a plan and that this is big and that it's dependent upon the public's engagement with all of this, right? So if you go to them basically at the end and you say, we've already drafted something here and we're not really interested in your input. We only want you to just sort of nod, right? That's not going to get engagement. And so engaging them early is really the key to getting them, because we're dependent upon them taking action. Mm-hmm. We're not going to achieve stuff on our own. The town isn't going to achieve stuff on its own.
And to be clear, I wasn't suggesting we should do that. I just I want to I just
want to speak to it because to me, it's not just doing the survey. It's actually then following through with consultations early on in the process too, right? And we can get to it later too. But I mean, I know that FCM PCP says to set the targets. Right? Early on. Basically, you're setting the target and then you're looking for how you're going to achieve that target.
Yep.
I am all about ambitious targets. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But I have a problem with setting that target first and then trying to backfill.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed as well, is that if we don't set a reasonable target, then how will we be able to achieve it in the end? Or what do we know that helps us achieve those targets? What actions contribute to those reductions? I'm not quite sure yet. So that's the next thing I'm trying to figure out.
And I know that FCM PCP has that as their structure, right? I also know you can go back and change it. But it's one of the key things that council actually has to approve is that target, right? And so setting the target, for example, if we do that in the next couple of months, and then you take it to council and they approve that, you know, and then we actually have to make it happen, basically, right?
Yes.
And as I said, I'm all about ambitious targets, but it doesn't help, I don't think, if you don't have some sense of what the community is prepared to do, interested in doing, of, you know, what all of the players are engaged with. So anyway, that's
more or less what I'm saying. Yeah.
In my mind is going to the community early, right? And saying, you know, what do you want to do, right? What do you think you can do? So anyway.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
For the public consultation, was that at the same time as the survey?
So in Tay Valley, what we did was we issued the survey, I think it was around about July. And then we had it out for a few months too, right? And then our first consultation would have been somewhere late September, October.
Okay, after it's been open for a period of time?
Yep.
Okay.
And then our second consultation, if I remember correctly, was basically right after Christmas, like January. And it was in those consultations that we did breakout groups. We had people talk about actual specific things and set their aspirations for a target reduction.
Okay.
And that's where Tay Valley community said they wanted serious target reductions. And so that then holds council responsible, right? For actually planning for those reductions. The county, on the other hand, did it the reverse, right? They did the standard consultation at the end of the process. It was, lame, didn't do anything. And they have ended up setting incredibly weak targets. Anyway.
Sort of jump in through you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, the survey that was done was to develop. I'm just looking at who do we target, what's the purpose of each of these consultation steps. So the survey was a broader targeted at the entire community, just asking specific high-level questions, just to flag, I guess, their level of interest and sort of devise some high-level ideas. And then the consultation afterwards was with folks was it with individual stakeholders who you reached out to, or anyone who was interested in coming into, and then refined sort of what you got at the survey, and then that informed your targets that your team recommended to Tay Valley Council?
So I think there's a couple of sort of responses there, Carl. So one, in doing the survey, we collected names and email addresses. So that gave us the group of people to go back to for the consultations. Okay. The survey, and Richard has basically the draft survey that we revised afterwards, frankly, but it at the time, this is now, 5 years ago. There wasn't that much data available, especially for a small rural municipality. So doing the survey helped me actually collect data in order to do milestone 1.
Okay.
Right?
Interesting.
And I had, approval of FCM PCP to do that, because small rural municipality didn't have the same access to Enbridge Hydro One data as an urban center would. Okay, so that was part of it, but part of it also was attitudinal, right? What do you aspire to? What do you want to see the municipality do? And then once we had that data and the list of names and email addresses, then we were able to go call on those people and the broader public to come in for the first consultation. That first consultation, we did, and I could check back on this, I'm sorry, we did actually set targets in a broad sense.
Yep.
So we asked people, are you content with the status quo? Do you want small steps, baby steps? Do you want mid steps? Do you want big steps? Okay. And nobody said they were satisfied with the status quo. Everybody fell within that mid to high steps. And in fact, there was one guy who went way beyond. He said, no, I want more, which was neat. Anyway, and in that first session too, we had very broad pictures of types of actions, you know,
Mhm.
so planting trees or home energy efficiency, that sort of thing. When we came together in the second consultation, that's when we did breakout groups and asked those same citizens what they would like to take, what they would like to do. And quite frankly, you know, would they step up to the bar and possibly volunteer or whatever, right? So that got much more specific. And that helped us then in terms of the actual detailed planning in milestone 3.
Okay.
Just so I'm following the discussion.
Yep.
So the content might be fine, it's the order we're talking about now.
That's correct.
We would take a block out of here and it might be better started here and
Right.
move it around. All right.
Right.
But the surveys, and you have the survey, so that's good.
Yes.
And say, I hope we have that, and others. And so it's just a matter of the committee giving direction to Richard to move these blocks around in an order that we hope to get the most. Okay.
And I love what you're saying. I guess the thing I would add is when we're talking about in terms of like, do we want small steps, medium steps, large steps? In terms of how I think about it, that doesn't strike me as a particularly helpful way of.
Same issue?
Yeah, like I think it's much more meaningful to say like, what types of steps are we talking about? Like, I'm as passionate as it gets about fighting climate change, but if you just ask me like how do I feel about the town fighting climate change, I would want to know details. I would want to know, what do you mean? Are we talking about something that's actually going to be effective or something that's, you know, more just window dressing? And like I feel like in order to have a constructive conversation with the public about it, we should do a little bit more homework in terms of presenting actionable things. Like, I'm not saying get a rubber stamp. I'm saying like, let's not present this in the abstract. Let's present some very real options and see which ones are met with positive responses.
I don't disagree with you. And again, for me, this comes back to that issue of setting the target, right? And PCP with ICLEI was supposed to have had a system so that you could plug in an action and it could tell you, cough out the data that says in your town, if you take that action, it will reduce your emissions by X. Okay? That's what they were supposed to do years ago. They've yet to come up with that. Okay? So there is no helpful tool to do that sort of calculation.
I can help with that part.
Yeah.
Climate modeling is something I've done a bunch before. Like if we're looking at a menu of options, we can score them and present like, because it like they're all a matter of gradation. Like there's, you know, for instance, planting trees. Planting trees is like one of the least contentious. Almost everyone's going to be like, yeah, I like the idea of planting trees. Depending on how much you want to plant trees, we could achieve carbon neutrality that way. It just would mean planting a whole lot of trees.
Yeah.
And so it's a question of scale. And there's like, you know, we can show that. We can show the different options and whatnot. But to me, I really like the option of planting trees. Of all the different things, it like the cost to reward ratio it's one of the highest. And but you know, we could also present like, well, what happens if we do stuff to, you know, improve the efficiency of our waste management, or if we start, you know, adding biochar to our garbage and, you know, reducing some of the fluxes that way. And like, we can show a bunch of different things. It just, to me, I feel like if we're offering concrete solutions, it's going to get met with a more positive response.
I don't disagree with you. And, you know, part of the challenge, different people are so far along the path, right? And so, you know, you will get the people who understand that we have to do really substantive work, right? Substantive, in order to reduce our GHGs. But then you get the people who say, well, I've, you know, used my blue box. Well, you know, that's where it's important to be able to say, okay, but that's only reducing GHGs by, you know, whatever, 0.5% or something, right? And so if we can say broadly or within a range, that sort of information, I think that would be helpful. Doesn't have to be so specific, but a range. And then that will help us get to the target too,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So, if we say that we want to basically meet with the national and global targets of roughly cutting half of our cutting our GHGs in half by 2030, what does that mean?
Exactly, that's a
No?
good point.
And I think to be able to explain that in some fashion is very helpful.
Definitely.
Okay, I'll take you up on the climate modeling. Yeah, we'll talk some more.
Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Well, I just want to know if you've got enough feedback that you can adjust the communication plan, move the boxes in what we've been talking about.
Yes, I can.
I'm talking to this, and I don't know if we want to decide that we want to do the target first and then the actions, or if we want to talk something of the actions and then set something of a target. I don't know.
So-
I think this is a really big issue.
Yeah. So I understand that our job is to meet with the public and get the public's version, opinions on setting our climate goals and whatnot. I also know that because we're a self-selected group of people that volunteer to do this, we're all probably passionate about climate change and probably inclined to encourage everyone to meet the federal standards at a minimum. I would like to do what PEI did and shoot for 10 years ahead of schedule, but at a minimum, I don't want to be I want our town to carry its weight. And I don't think we have to pretend that we're neutral, unbiased people on this. I think it's okay if we're all but I think to do that responsibly is to present a way to get there that is affordable, that isn't we're not suggesting that everyone just goes out and buys electric vehicles. We're suggesting we have, I think we would need to show that this is an achievable goal within our financial means in order to, you know what I'm saying? And I think if we can present that and we can convince the town that this is an achievable thing, then we'll have their support. But, if we just ask them, do you think we could do this hypothetically? No, they won't.
No. Not do you think you can do this? What do you want to do about this? It's a different question.
I think a lot of people wouldn't say, I want to ambitiously meet the federal deadline. They would say, we're an impoverished town and we need to have modest goals. And I think that's a reasonable, defensible position. I would just like to encourage them to shoot higher. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel that if you ask the question, what do you want to do? I want to help with reduce the GHS, but what do I do? Well, if you start looking at the data, for every average person, the number one is your dwelling. Does it mean that if I really want to make an impact, I got to move to a tiny house, right? But if I cannot do that, what things that I can do that can minimize the impact? So there we talk about, the different stuff you do, how much carbon you're reducing and so on. You give people a choice. You provide a framework in that sense there. And then, we could then adopt, oh, I can do this. I can wear sweaters instead of just this, and lower the temperature and so on and so forth. Those are the things that people can actually do. What about other habits? Then you get into your shopping and all the other things that impacts on the overall outcome. That's what I see in terms of ways that people can act on. Right.
I think part of the challenge is there are things the town can do in the corporate, right? That's the town's responsibility. But the community, there's only some things that the town can do on that front, right? It's motivation, it's bringing information about the various programs, it's funding, it's working with partners. But the town cannot achieve getting everybody to take action, right? So we really have to engage the populace in doing that. And that is the challenge.
Yeah, I do think it's a different question of what can I do versus what must we do. I guess we'll have to think about how to frame that conversation for the public so that we can get the most interest.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines that if we're gonna provide solutions, like what would you like to see, that we should at least be able to do and act on those solutions. Because otherwise people are gonna, come back to us and say, well, you asked us what we wanted and now you're not doing what we wanted. So
Yeah, exactly.
like, it would be great to know what can we do? What's it within our
Capacity.
capacity to do as part of that menu of options, so that we're not promising things that we can't fulfill.
So again, like I'm happy to do to help with the math in terms of the modeling.
Sure.
If we want to look at so we're not reinventing the wheel, what just other municipalities, what options they have considered. Like ideally, if they actually implemented some of them, we could get feedback on that. But we're wrestling with the same question that presumably every other municipality is also wrestling with. So there's got to be some best practices and lessons learned that we can pull from, right? So, yeah.
And there's the portal that PCP operates, right? So you connected to all these other municipalities across the country. Locally, we have the county's plan and starting to get implemented. We have other lower tier municipalities that are starting to do some things. So, just an example is between the county and some of the other lower tiers, and Smith Falls for that matter too, looking at more bus transit, right? And developing or getting some funding in order to do a strategic plan for public transit. So that's hopefully in the works. That's something that most people are aware of, right? And it's something that we need to be taking to the community and saying, here's what is going to be happening or hopefully happening or whatever, right? So that's just one example. All of the stuff around housing is amazing. I mean, our Climate Concierge project has been just a super success. And we have brought not just information about greener homes, but about all these other programs to people too. And so that's underway, right? But that's a whole education, long-term working with people, because a lot of people don't do retrofits at the drop of a hat, right? So, it's a process, right?
For this menu of options for the survey, like could we pick, say, 6 or 10 that score the highest bang return for the most carbon sequestered or averted versus cost to implement, and just present those to here are 10 ideas, here's roughly where we think they would get us, which ones are you supportive of, and just get and then we'll have just public feedback on 10 options, or you know what I'm saying? Especially if we can just pull the 10 greatest options from other municipalities.
So, we've yet to get the data for the community.
Yeah, we're not complete yet, right?
But, off the top of my head, that's going to be transportation, housing, and waste.
Yes.
And organic waste. And so, one of the very simplest, easiest, cheapest things to do is compost.
We don't have a waste diversion here, so that's...
I know, yes. And this is, I'm going to bring that up later too. But anyway, so, capturing the data, right, is, and does it get incorporated into the corporate or the community?
Does it go, you mean?
And as a small municipality, I believe you have the choice.
Yeah.
And because it's a municipal decision about how that happens, then it's recommended that put it into the corporate, because then there is greater say over that.
That would make sense if we're getting a contract, for example.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I'm sorry, that is just one, right? Absolutely, we could say compost. Just a no-brainer. Anyway.
Peter?
So just getting back to that
Mhm.
climate communication plan, it's obvious that the council members would be internal stakeholders,
Yes.
and I'm pleased to see that. I don't know my colleagues well enough. I think there's work to do. Let's just say that there's a mixed response maybe
Fair enough.
on this. Because what I have in mind, and I think the mayor does, is like we have to invest money, which is a political decision, which is going back to the taxpayers and saying we need, and refer to it as investment rather than spending. But we have opportunities. There's a cost to this, and council needs to be aware and on board and ready to market that. So this survey also, you started out by saying that it did kind of nudge the council in Tay Valley forward when they saw what the residents were ready to do. There's no doubt in my mind that our council will need the same sort of incentive, and the louder that voice is. Now, if they say, I'll do everything but don't raise my taxes, that's a challenge, but there are things we can do through grants, and we're reducing our costs quite well at the water treatment plant.
That's correct.
Significant reductions in electrical costs and hydroelectric. But the big pig that's on the graph is the waste management. And there's ideas that we could do there, investments. That's what that have the biggest return.
And when you talk waste, Peter, you're talking solid waste,
Solid.
sewage waste?
Sewage. Our wastewater plant.
Right, okay.
It's an energy hog, and it's dated. It's still efficient. It runs. We're putting money in every year to keep it going. It's fine. Where are we getting that energy from? And that's, to me, that's a council, and that's the community need to understand that when you think about something we could do, it's one of the biggest of the corporate and for the town.
And
It's
for the town,
huge.
That to me was the most significant one.
Yeah. And we get the gas bills. We get the bills. You see them.
The question is, every municipality is facing the same thing.
Every
Collectively,
urban.
right.
Every urban.
Right. Collectively, what can be done?
Yeah.
And that may be one of the prime targets that we've got to get a national solution.
Yeah.
The other thing too is in terms of commitment, sometimes little actions can remind people. For example, the anti-idling thing. Sort of remind people, you can do something about it. And now another step in from anti-idling is if you synchronize our traffic lights, automatically we actually have with that. But this is not an easy problem.
Oh.
Right. But other than that, then, it's up to each person. Yeah.
That's another discussion we could have, but because I'll just drop it and we can open the door another time. But are we looking for individual habit change, which frankly I don't think gets us anywhere at this late stage, or are we looking for system change? And system change is what we can do here, right? Because the town is engaged. So we can be looking at the changes to lighting systems as opposed to asking people to make those habit changes.
I want to just echo that. Like to me, we should encourage everyone to compost, but in terms of something we can actually do as a town, if we were to implement a compost bin system or something, just like acts of government, I think are just like clearly way more efficacious. And it's just very often when people talk about climate change, it's this kind of virtual signaling, weird, hazy concept instead of a math problem. And the thing that I really like about this exercise is it's data driven, and it we are really just trying to crack a math problem. We're trying to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases and for the lowest cost possible. And there's literally hundreds of options available, but they each have a different return on investment. And I think like the buses are a beautiful example. Like I would love to see buses in town, don't get me wrong, but I think if you were to calculate how much it would cost to institute a bus program, and then you were to look at the amount of greenhouse gases that would prevent versus spending that money on our waste management, it's not even close. And I think once you do that math, what makes sense to try to do becomes very clear. And the things that would just be a waste of time or window dressing, they fall by the wayside. And that's why I really think this should be data driven.
Okay. Makes sense.
So that means doing the calculations before setting the target.
Yes,
Fundamentally, what you're saying.
exactly.
And so if then that means a change in the plan. I don't know, if that means you go back to FCM PCP and say, this is what we are choosing to do here, right? Which they are, in my dealings with them anyway, amenable to that sort of thing.
Yeah, we'll communicate with them and let you know. It's the same slow questions along with the questions that Nelson had earlier last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'll let you know what they say.
Excellent.
Okay, so to summarize that, Carl. So Richard's going to go back and, adjust the communications plan. And Nate's going to, how long will you need to bring back that climate modeling? Like,
So-
are you going to work with Richard or bring it back?
So
here?
I'll need to know, each individual option I can score. But we first will need the options. Like each individual one is its own scoring
The
project.
survey first.
Before that,
We'll do the survey first. So once the data's done, the survey happens, then we'll do the climate modeling and see what options we have. Then we'll adjust the survey and then we can work forward.
Okay,
That was too fast, was it?
yeah, repeat that one more time. We'll do the survey first.
So once we get to the calculations for the community for the data,
Okay,
then we have everything for both the community and the corporate side. Then we'll look at our list of options and we'll revise the survey. And then once we have all data, then it's easier for us to figure out where we can do the options for the climate modeling. And then we adjust the survey. Yeah, so the survey will be the last thing that'll be done before we start M2.
so it will be interesting to see the numbers
Mhm.
for the community,
Mhm.
right? And just see, where we end up there. And I hope that you're able to get waste number, like not just sewage, but organics
Right.
and recycling numbers, right? For the whole community under the corporate. Anyway, yes. Okay.
Carl, did you have a question?
Sorry, could you just repeat I was just jotting down the last notes. This is important. I want to make sure I capture it. Could you please repeat the committee's consensus in terms of the order of the steps?
Yeah, I think Richard said it well.
So we're going to complete M1 by getting the community data completed, so the community emissions data. And then once we have the inventory data for the community, then we will look at creating the survey.
But you don't have to wait. We'll
Pardon?
do the survey.
We
You
have a
just
draft.
wouldn't
We have a
send it.
draft.
Yeah, we have a draft, so it's a more revision of a survey, and this.
And the timing.
So complete the draft of the survey.
Yes.
Okay.
And the survey will be informed by the climate modeling.
And sorry, this is the climate modeling is what Nate's working on, and
That's
that would be developed before we do the survey.
Yes. So data, modeling, survey.
And at what point will we be releasing the survey?
I don't know. When the data's done, I guess we'll have a better sense of when the survey will come out, because it's like chicken and egg kind of thing.
Mhm.
Once we have the data, then we can figure out how long it'll take us to get the survey out. But once the community data is finished, then we'll know.
Okay.
So if you want a date?
Oh no, I don't need dates. I'm just thinking in terms of the order of each individual piece.
So it's going to be the data first, and then we have the climate modeling, and then we have the survey. So the survey is the last thing that will come out.
Okay, and then the target would come after that.
Yes. course, the target would come out after that because the climate modeling would tell us what numbers we're comfortable with in terms of suggesting to the committee, say 10% or 15. I don't know what reduction targets we have at the time.
But we have some dates, so like key deliverables that we already had set those, didn't we? Like roughly, like
Yeah.
we're not going to drag. We didn't want to drag this out for. It shouldn't take us 2 years.
Agreed.
It won't take us 2 years. It's just going to.
No, I know. I just threw that out. I mean, but to keep it moving, like you say, we.
Do you want a rough monthly timeline?
Well, like spring, summer, fall, or even.
I can see us getting the data done for the community at the end of spring. So we're right now April, March, May, and then we will start the data with the terms of the climate modeling after the community data is done. And then if we have the survey open for, let's say, 3 months at the end of May, June, July, so the summer, and then we will look at, let's say, a workshop, say September, something like that.
Okay. Can you deliver on that?
I will try.
So my only question in that
Yes.
scenario is, what do you need to do the modeling? Because if it comes back, community data shows that in the town of Smiths Falls, right? We're not talking Smiths Falls and area, the town of Smiths Falls, the greater GHG is coming from buildings, houses and buildings. The second one is coming from transportation, and the third from waste. What do you need to know about the buildings in order to estimate what sort of GHG reduction we can get?
So you'd have to approach each menu option on it as its own math equation. And so, for example, if we're scoring you were talking about the heat exchanger scenario where you're claiming roughly a 30% improved efficiency by installing one of those. We can look at the number of houses in Smiths Falls roughly that qualify for that, get a rough number on that, look at what percentage of the full energy pie that grouping represents, take 30% off of their output and say, if we were to get total adoption of that grant program in this town, we would see this much greenhouse gas reductions. Like that's an example that like a totally different example, just so we're clear, is like if I found a peer-reviewed study that showed that if you put a layer of biochar over landfill, you dramatically reduce nitrous oxide and methane emissions from the soil. If we just, as a public policy, did that with the biochar we're making anyways, that would probably cost us close to nothing and could dramatically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions over time, because that's an every year thing that, in order to do that, it would be, you'd do a calculation based on landfill size. So we would need dimensions and off-gassing metrics. But it's all relatively straightforward math once you start doing it. It really is. It's not.
I appreciate that. So in terms of the housing sector, because the county has already done a great chunk of this work, right, under their plan to do this funding program and have submitted it to the FCM. Now, is Smiths Falls a part of that?
Not to my knowledge. So what is this funding program for? Is it retrofitting buildings? Or
Smiths Falls is eligible for a lot of those retrofitting. Yeah.
And so what this is that the county has applied to FCM for a large tranche of money to offer financing to homeowners to do retrofits paid back on their taxes, on their municipal taxes. And in order to do this, the county hired Greenscape Consulting out of Kingston, who we brought in to speak to the county. And they have done all this detailed calculation of housing in the county. So the age of, certain sectors, all this sort of stuff, right? And what the greatest opportunities are in terms of GHG reductions.
So that company essentially looked at retrofitting buildings on the community side of the action plan.
Yeah. And so I don't know if Smith Falls is part of that or
Yeah.
not. I'm just
Seems-
unclear, Peter. That's
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would just add that a month ago, on the public housing stock, the county owns the 500 units. Most of the retrofits we approved a month ago were to put ground source heat pumps in on
yes.
Burke Street, which is like 200 apartments,
Yes.
another one on cars, like everything's gone. So who gets the credit for that? It'll take place in the town of Smith Falls. The county, we pay our share. The county is the initiator and the owner of the property. So does the county get credit, or we don't want to count it twice, right?
Interesting.
Sorry.
That's a problem for another day, but
Yes.
that will be implemented in this year and next.
That
In
is
short order.
such good.
Very large scale, like 1.2 million in heat pumps and ground source heat pumps and solar. And
This is tremendous news, and I can't wait to see the news release on that. But anyway, so but the point of it is that the county has collected data. Now, if it doesn't include Smith Falls data, it could well be applicable to Smith Falls in terms of, you know, broadly the same age of buildings and yada yada yada, right? And so you might just be able to access that data. You know, I know in terms of new builds here, right? Most of them are going in with natural gas.
Automatically.
Yeah, that has to end, right? And we know from your work, right, planning, we know exactly the detail about that, and so that can be calculated. What sort of changeover will happen over the next number of years in terms of electric heat pumps and getting rid of gas, right? That sort of thing. So, you know, that I think the data, I don't think it should be too difficult. And then the plan that the town is working with the county with in terms of transportation, that strategic transportation plan, the county must be collecting data from Smith
it's a
Falls too.
feasibility study.
Yeah, so, excuse me, yeah. So that, again, that data should be, I don't think it should be hard to get that data, is my
Is it
point.
the data for the feasibility study?
That is being gathered for the transportation,
right?
yeah,
For the-
and for
So
residential and
it's
buildings.
not if I may, Madam Chair, it's not a bus that'll run up and down our streets. It's a bus to connect county towns. I don't think it's intended to, I mean, it might have a couple of pickup points if we,
Oh, interesting.
but it's not
Yep.
urban bus system.
So we'll be running throughout Smith Falls?
It's a county-wide that can move workers or people efficiently. So how feasible is it? Time will tell.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway, I'm sorry, my point just being that I think in terms of data, I think that you should be able to get enough good data that it shouldn't take too long to do that part.
Agreed. I think the challenge is really like us deciding what the menu should look like, and then scoring it. It's a little homework assignment, but it's not too crazy. It's deciding what we want to present as options. I think that it's going to take some careful thought.
And the process is standardized to do that. It's done the same way. Like,
I mean, I'm surprised that this system isn't designed this way, frankly. Like, it seems very odd to me that they want each municipality to independently brainstorm how they're going to combat climate change. It seems to me like we're all, well, the menu of options isn't, right? Like, we don't have this is what we should be choosing from for options.
It's not.
Well,
People have gone before us.
Yeah.
and that's where absolutely it's worth, plugging into that portal, right? Part of it is that it was all large cities was doing this for years, right? And to have small towns and rural areas, that's only come on in the last couple of years. And part of it is kind of sensitivity around pushback on the climate issue. So they didn't want to be seen to be pushing small municipalities to do certain things, right? They want to leave it to us to decide. So anyway.
Okay, so Richard, do you have enough information to move forward? With
I have
that
plenty,
item?
thank you.
Yeah, and
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll move on to priority issue 5.2. That's the revised corporate greenhouse gas emissions inventory.
Yes. All right. So, where are we now? So essentially, this is looking at the revised data for the corporate emissions inventory. What was happening is that in 2017, the data was not looking at all the smaller buildings and facilities. They're looking at all the major ones like town hall, the fire station, but things like parks and recreational facilities and water pumps were not included. So after review of the 2021 data, I realized that the same error was carried over from 2017. We're not incorporating all of the smaller buildings. So the data was reassessed just so that we have more of a fuller picture of what we're looking at. And I know that Nelson wanted a breakdown of the buildings, and I do have that for you if you're looking for it. Just so that you can see what buildings were producing the most, consuming the most energy, for example. So, for example, the water sewage, the reason why the value is so large has to do with the fact that when you're looking at the electricity use, there's only 1 meter. So when you're trying to figure out what pumps in the facility are using the most, I can't break it down any further than the fact that the entire facility is counted as one. And it kind of gives you an idea if you're looking at trying to reduce our energy consumption at that area. We'd be looking at more accurate meters, for example, as a recommendation, or we're looking at finding more up-to-date metering information. So that's one way we could break down to see where the area would be consuming the most. But for right now, just the colossal water and sewage facility.
And I'm sorry, when you say 1 meter, is that fresh water going to all the towns, like the water pressure and the sewage coming out, or?
Yeah. So in terms of the hydro bill, we only get one. There's only one bill for the building, so I can't tell you exactly if it's related to water treating or waste treatment.
Okay.
So I can't exactly break it down and tell you where the energy is being used in the facility.
And is it measuring gas fluxes too? Like a lot of the greenhouse gases that come from human sewage are decomposition gases. It's not electricity. It's like methane and nitrous oxide coming off of the.
Right. So this is only looking at the gas usage, not the gas consumption related.
Natural gas usage.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And the natural gas, if there's a natural gas number, it's only relating to how much the building is using. So it's not breaking down based on how much per pump, for example. So I can't tell you how much natural gas the building, each specific pump is using, just the overall building.
Yeah.
That's in relation to one of your questions that you were asking earlier.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And this just goes based on GHG emissions by sector.
Do we still dry the in the sewage treatment plant? Do we still dry the pellets and so on?
I'm not sure. I can ask Jason. Jason's the person who runs the wastewater treatment facility, so I can obviously take your questions down and ask him.
Because that aspect could lose a bit of energy, and we could recover it. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking it must be, Peter, because of the cost, right? That's what other Peter was saying,
Right.
It's an outrageous cost, so it must be that it's still being dried into pellets. What's happening to the pellets too?
I believe they're used as a fertilizer.
Don't know.
Yeah, I think.
I know that was the intention, but I don't know that they are.
Yeah.
But maybe Peter McKenna, we were just talking about the sewage treatment plant. And so is it the case that it's still all the pellets are still being dried? And then what is happening to the pellets too?
As far as I know, that's still happening. And there's a very limited market for those pellets. There is somebody that comes in and picks them up, or a couple. That's the last time we had a tour there was a year and a half ago, and that was the case.
Interesting.
Okay.
So the corporate emissions inventory data set.
And at first they thought there was a market, they could actually monetize it, but it doesn't appear that way.
Was there at one point?
The public kind of soured on them because they have heavy metals in them. Human waste is a problematic fertilizer.
That would make sense, actually. Okay, so what I have here is the business as usual forecast for the corporate side. I have another way of showing the graph that makes it easier. So the PCP2 automatically uses a 12% increase per year. So if you're looking at the differences between 2021, 2025, and 231, that's sort of the increments that they're going with. So 2021 would be the baseline year, and then 2025 would be the mid-year, and then 2031 would be the end year, the year that's when we finish or create a climate action plan. I don't know if it's easier to read. I have another graph that looks a lot simpler to read, but essentially that's for each energy sector, you see the energy use as it goes down over time. Now, this is just if we continue on our current trajectory. This is not our forecast or the emissions reduction forecast, for example.
12% a year, it automatically goes up.
That's what the tool does. So like I can't say that. That's just like that's how they do the math.
Business as usual, right? So it doesn't take, and it's just based on population growth?
Yes.
Our population isn't growing 12% a year.
It grew 4% between the census, or 5%. Anyways, that's fine.
I can inquire with PCP as to the rationale for the 12% increase, just to give a bit more clarity as to how they come to the calculations.
Yeah, pretty much anytime they give us a math thing like that, if you could just ask to them to show their work, it just, because it's the devil is so in the details with that stuff. And those little math machinations, like adding a 12% each year, can radically distort things. And if like that might be the number that made sense for Toronto, but is not the number that makes sense for Smiths Falls, and we just
Canada's growing in Ontario at that rate, but.
Yeah, and it's the type of thing that we can easily adjust it for our own models. We just need to see what they did to get to the numbers they have.
Okay, that was a good suggestion.
Yep.
And here's another way of describing the data, just if it's visually more easy to read, but yes. So for each year, you have a breakdown based on how much each energy sector is using. So if the first one would be buildings, the next one would be vehicles, the one between that would be street lights, and the big one would be waste and sewage, and the last one would be waste.
I'm sorry, say that again, Richard?
First one.
First one, building.
Which is green?
Yeah, so think of it from left to right.
Yeah.
And the next one would be vehicles. The small sliver, street lights.
The smallest? What?
Small
There's a
sliver,
little blue in there.
There's a little blue in there. I know, this isn't really a very helpful. I know. And then we have the water and sewage, which is the biggest one. And then we have the waste.
Okay.
Okay, and so one of the things, Peter, when you were out, that Richard was saying, is there's only 1 meter. So the electricity consumption is only measured at 1 point. So you can't see the difference in electricity that's used for the waste water versus the water treatment plant.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Two different
doesn't
bills.
help. Well, it's
Comes as one bill to me, so I don't know if
Comes as one bill, but I'm sure that they're separate billings. I don't know. They'd have to have different.
I would imagine. It's
gotta be.
But one bill, I can see what you're saying. Maybe they've collapsed it, but.
Well, I'll look deeper and see if there's anything more I can find out.
Because that's
I
a
understand.
huge.
It's huge, yeah.
And our water treatment plant is done. We should have Jason in to talk about billable water versus treated water and what we're able to bill for. We've reduced it. They've reduced it. Like 30% are non-billable water. And all the electricity. So our plant is running at 14% or 19% capacity.
Really?
That's all it, that's the water.
Doesn't take much.
It's built, I'm not saying it's overbuilt, it was built for growth,
Yeah.
but it is such, and they've become so efficient.
Yeah.
Yes.
In spite of all the other costs, labor, chemicals, and that going up, repairs, they've been able to lower their overall cost because of repairs to the water and finding where the water was going, the billable water, and They've just done a remarkable job.
That's
I think it would be
Just-
good to have a presentation.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's
So
so
to celebrate that kind of stuff.
Well, it's in a national trades paper, the example from Smith Falls on how they up their billable water versus.
And so you're saying there is a story in.
Oh, it's a fascinating story.
But it's actually written up.
It is written in a
Because-
trade paper.
I think that should be provided to, I know local media isn't, we don't have much, but CBC out of Ottawa.
Yeah,
It's fascinating.
it is fascinating.
That actually would be good for Stu Standing.
Right, right. Yeah.
That would be a good one for CC.
So anyways, we should invite Jason over. He loves talking about it. It's so fascinating to hear it too. I mean, I've heard more about water than ever wanted to know. But that's,
But that's such a good news. And in terms of launching a whole public consultation, to be able to say that the town itself has these huge achievements is just a real motivator, So
and I don't mean to talk so much, but it's a very difficult story because the costs of operating the plant are either leveled or going down, but the water bills are going up. And that is because we have an obligation to put money aside for when to replace that plant
Oh, planning for the
and
future.
to keep the infrastructure under the ground going. People say, wait a minute, your costs are going down, but my bill keeps going up. So it is a complicated story to tell
Interesting.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Man.
politically.
Okay, so what is left to do would be the completion of the emissions inventory for the community action plan. And at this time, we only have the stationary and the waste energy data. And the waste energy data, for example, came from the JM, which is a contractor that takes all their garbage and waste. So we only really have the tonnage so far for the waste. So I have to look deeper if we have the breakdown for the recycling and things like that, but we really only have the tonnage.
So how is tonnage of waste being used to calculate greenhouse gases, or is it?
How I understand is that essentially we have the amount that's being produced and then we have just the expenditure in terms of the cost. And that's how we're going with it. But I think there are other options depending on the information available. But I think going with GM, based on the fact that we have a contract, that's the sort of information I had from Public Works. But I can dig a little deeper and see if there's anything else that we can use.
And just from my own understanding, in terms of how we like the bubble around Smiths Falls, like we're calculating the carbon footprint of Smiths Falls. Mm-hmm. If we like the trash that gets moved to a landfill site outside of Smiths Falls, does that count towards us? Like, is that our carbon footprint? Is that
it would be
wherever the landfills? I would think it should. And similarly, our food supply chain. That's all carbon that's happening on the highways and in the surrounding farms, but that's
not included. So
it's
like,
not included.
So yeah, the supply chains are not included as part of the overall calculations.
Okay, but trash is.
Yes, based on the fact of what was picked up in Smith Falls. That makes sense.
And we produce it,
Yeah.
kind of.
We're monitoring outputs, not inputs.
Right.
Seems.
So what we only monitor what we take away, if that makes sense.
Global definitions,
Yeah.
and then it gets filtered down to national, and so I know, but that is the way it is.
Yeah. Okay.
But one thing is occurring to me: do you have the Climate Lens tool that Bob Argue?
I believe so. You mean the online tool, the Climate Lens assessment?
Yeah.
I play with
Because
it.
there's all sorts of data in there
Yeah.
that can be applied to these numbers, right?
Definitely,
So,
yeah.
and
For infrastructure type projects, they can score.
Well, not just infrastructure, but waste.
Yes.
Right. So he's got
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
in there about Blue Box and
Like a lot of the
and-
waste stuff, there's energy for processing, and then there's the gases itself that it produces. And it sounds like we are not counting the gases,
That's right.
which is, I think we should. I don't think that's I think if what we are saying is that we are creating a full baseline accounting of what our town is doing, we have to count all the greenhouse gases that are right.
I guess my question to you would be how.
I mean, there's ways like there's equipment that is used, and presumably the other towns have done this, and we could even just borrow their data. But like a significant amount of waste, of like sewage waste, is the gases that come off of there, and we can mitigate that. Like that's one of the easier things that we could target. But right now we're not even counting it, which seems like a problem.
Well, that makes sense. I just have to think about how we would do it for a wastewater treatment facility plant. I don't know how they process things there. So to say that we want to find ways to mitigate the amount of gases being produced is a good idea, but I don't know how they measure that at that facility.
Yeah.
So that's a bigger conversation.
Yeah, usually the equipment, it'd be called like an eddy covalence machine.
And they might be doing it.
Yeah.
It would be if we could dedicate a meeting just to Jason, because he's
Yeah, I
also
think so.
responsible for wastewater and sewage as well as water treatment. He very progressive guy.
I think what we should do is have a list of questions, maybe some of the questions you have already sent me, and we
Yeah.
can forward them to Jason so that we can have another discussions.
Have him in and talk. It's
Yeah, we could do that. It would make sense if we want to.
Yeah,
I know.
Curious
Sorry.
to hear. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
He sounds like he's a wealth of knowledge. So
Yep.
we should have him, yeah.
And does he know about the water tower and the new water tower too?
he's part of the team, but that's a public works, so that's Director McMunn, but I'm sure Jason is right up to speed on it.
Okay. Interesting.
So I'll go through how the energy will be calculated for the remaining three. So for the transportation, we have the vehicles, kilometers traveled, fuel sales. This should say total emissions. The previous PCP protocol calculated vehicles with the vehicle registration, but the new one is only looking at total emissions. And that only if you have the data overall for all of Smith Falls. So we discussed last month about the vehicles for kilometers traveled as being one of the more accurate ways of calculating the data. For our project update, I will be saying that we won't be able to calculate that data because for Clean Air Partnership, which would be the company that would be collecting the data for us and doing the assessment, they only have up until 2020, from 2016 to 2020, so they don't actually have 2021. So we would have to look at another way of trying to assess the transportation for GHG emissions.
Increase it 12% a year.
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I have to. Although that was COVID year, wasn't it?
2021, yep.
2020, yeah. So that
That's going to be an outlier anyway.
dramatically, yeah.
4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so extrapolating from 2020 would be interesting. Yeah, I'm talking with Kevin. Kevin is my contact for Clean Air on Wednesday. So I'll let you know what he says. But yes.
Even if we could pick an earlier year, because the population has grown, and then just take the total number from that year, divide it by the population, and then times that by the current population, that will account for the increase in population, right? Like, because it's just a
Possible.
ballpark number.
Possible. It's better. So the fuel sales is obviously another option that we could do, but it's not very accurate because it wouldn't necessarily, it assumes everyone who is purchasing fuel here lives here, and we know that's not necessarily the case. So there's going to be gaps in the data. So that's the issue with using fuel sales. So I guess if we could extrapolate data for the vehicles kilometers traveled for another year, maybe that'd be better than using fuel sales because it'd be more accurate. So I'll talk with Kevin to see what option is more effective. if that makes
Ideally
sense.
a per capita, and if we could just look at it from a couple of years, then you should be able to see if it's consistent per capita. Like my guess is it would be. People don't have dramatically different driving habits from one year to the next.
And Richard, when they give you Ministry of Transportation, I guess,
Yep.
do they give you the number of electric vehicles registered in the town? Do they?
So how it works is Clean Air would have access to the data, so I wouldn't necessarily know how many like EV vehicles versus diesel versus gas. I wouldn't know. I mean, I can ask and see what the data looks like, but so far as the actual numbers, I wouldn't know. And the other thing would be how we would make this sustainable. So that's something I've been thinking about for this whole project. It's one thing to get the data from the hydro bills and ESSO and say Enbridge, for example, but if we're going to go with say the clean air data, that's roughly $1,500 just to get the data and have them assess it for us. $1,500.
Okay.
Yes. So
It's not much.
it may not be much, but it's more to say that it's something that's a cost, right? Because the PCP recommends that we update the data every 2 years. So whomever is going to be doing this sort of project will have to keep track of that information and ensure that it's accessible. Because right now, LANAC is trying to update their information and they don't have for
I'm sorry, they don't have,
2023.
okay.
So they're looking at fuel cells data because they don't have access to the vehicle for kilometers traveled. And so if we're trying to make recommendations based on available data, it will be interesting to see how we can continue to have access to that data over time.
So they want us to do reassess everything every 2 years to, okay.
Is that like?
It's a recommendation.
It used to be the case that you did that every 5 years, like the full suite of data collection. Every 2 years was more looking at, what progress you had made, sort of thing, without doing a full
So that would be partial, you
data
think?
suite. Yeah, I mean, they may well have changed, I just don't know.
How it was explained to me was 5 years was what would be recommended if you're not doing it as a regular checkup. So 2 years would be your checkup, but 5 years would be the recommended overall. Like if you haven't done it since 2017, for example.
Refresh the whole plan.
Right, exactly.
Because this is a 10-year time horizon, is that right?
Yes.
So there'd be two,
Yeah.
like a halfway point.
Mhm. Hence the mid-year.
So I'm sorry, I know I keep just jumping in, but I'm not proposing that the survey information captured be used to replace how you're collecting data.
Mhm.
But, the notion of doing a survey every few years
Mhm.
is really interesting, right?
Mhm.
To see how
People's perceptions have changed, more attitudes.
their practices have changed, how their attitudes have changed, the whole kit and caboodle, right? I mean, it's a notion there to think about. Would that be helpful in terms of transportation data? Like instead of spending the $1,500 every 2 years or whatever?
Mhm. To have a survey?
Yeah, I don't know.
The survey would give us people's attitudes, but it wouldn't necessarily, it would be like a fraction of the population, obviously, right? And I guess the fuel sales would be an assumption that just for all of Smith Falls. So maybe in conjunction with each other, as opposed to just one over the other.
So just to clarify, the 1,500 is for the fuel sales, not for the inventory.
No, it's for the inventory.
It's for okay. Do they do the fuel sales too, or is that
Fuel sales is with Calibrate, and I'll have to speak with them and see what they're costing us.
okay? I'd rather skip the fuel sales. It's going to be junk data.
There's a reason we've got 5 gas stations out on Highway 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's what that's going to be.
Carbon footprint.
Kingston, it's a major thoroughfare. It's
Yeah.
I think, what is it, Carl, on Beckwith Street? It's like 20,000 cars a day. Like it's something like, it's always stunning when I hear it. It's
Yes.
crazy.
Yep.
That would be, I guess, the caution using the fuel sales.
Yeah.
Yep.
For the agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, we were looking at the assessment of GHG emissions from livestock and agricultural land use, but I don't believe we have a lot of that here. I don't think necessarily that would be applicable to Smith Falls. So as I would do a cursory look, but I don't necessarily think we have a lot of land uses that would be categorized as agricultural that would be significant, where we can actually count how much is being used. And for industrial processes and produce use. So there'd be an assessment of total GHG emissions from industrial processes and product use. So I'll have to look and see where in their industrial lands produce the certain level of GHG emissions. Now that could be an assessment based on electricity or natural gas. But it gets its own specific category as opposed to being stationary.
So when I was doing that, proprietary concerns came to bear.
Yes, I remember
And,
that.
and so what happened in Tay Valley was one very particular enormous industrial player there
The
said,
only one.
Do I have to name?
I know.
and so they just refused to give any
Participate.
assistance, right? And then tapping into Enbridge and Hydro One to get data, they had to exclude
Ah,
any proprietary. So anyway, just a heads up,
fair enough.
And so I'm not suggesting that as a committee we don't approach some of the larger companies here, right, and ask them to participate. I think that would be great, but just
Beware.
when you're collecting data.
It's good to know.
Richard, I just have a question pertaining
Almost
to
thing.
that. So do you have to then approach each one of these industrial businesses like independently? Like, or how does that work?
So for example, with Hydro One, when you request information for all of Smith Falls, you break it down based on sectors. So that residential, industrial, institutional. So that's where I can get that information. But as she was saying, Sabrina was saying, if you're looking for specific people who are producing large energy and you're asking them for information, they're not as forthcoming, and Enbridge won't give it to you unless you sign an affidavit. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So if Tweed, for example, is in full operations and you wanted to know specifically how much tissues they were producing, either they'll give it to you voluntarily or you have to write an affidavit to get that information. Yeah. Now, moving on to milestone 2, which would be the next phase of the project, we're looking at trying to determine the targets for the community and the corporate, as we were discussing earlier. And that also comes as well with a council resolution that was passed on the set targets.
Apologies.
Oh, it's almost that time.
I got my wife to pick them up today. I'm good.
Okay, good. Yes. So the PCP tool gives us two methods, as Carl pointed out when we were discussing this. They're relatively the same. Just one does a general targets for each community and corporate, or you can do specific for each sector, like say building or residential or building, or for say vehicles, things like that. If you were looking at setting specific reduction targets for each sector as opposed to the overall section of the plan. Now, looking at the information that we have, method 1 seems to be the most likely that we'll be looking for. We don't really have specific data for each sector that will allow us to set reductions, unless, I guess, we do some more climate modeling. It all depends on how we assess the data. Now, what I have prepared on the next slide essentially is a hypothetical 10% reduction target. We haven't discussed what reduction targets we'll be setting, but I wanted to give the committee an overview of what it would look like if we're trying to set our reduction targets and what it would look like. Now, it's really hard to read, unfortunately, but essentially the darkest line is the 10%. And if you look at the top of the graph, that would be the baseline if we're continuing as normal. So all it is just showing us the change from the baseline from our target reductions and over a 10-year period. That's all it would look like. And this is just for the corporate side. So what it is that when milestone 1 is complete, there'll be 2 of these, one for the corporate and one for the community. And you can set different reduction targets for each corporate and community, so you don't have to set them for each of them to be the same.
And in reality, it won't be a straight line. It could be.
Yeah, it will be.
It could go backwards and then
Right.
have a nice dip, go back and.
Yeah, this is on if all things remain the same. Nothing changes, and we'll just continually reducing.
But the target is one of the critical things that council has to approve.
That's correct.
And so that chart is very telling. Now, as of a year and a half ago, FCM was recommending that municipalities choose a 45% reduction.
Well, I haven't been told that specifically, not saying that isn't true, but how I was understanding is that we are obviously make our own determination. They have their own recommendations, but whether we follow them or not is based on what the town is willing to politically and financially commit to.
Yep. I will find and send you that.
That'd be lovely, thank you.
specific.
So in terms of the next steps, we will just be completing the community emissions inventory, and we'll be creating a survey that we were discussed earlier, and we'll be setting the targets for the corporate and the community emissions. And there'll be a report brought to the committee explaining our options and how we would like to stage everything so that we can have a sense of how to go forward after we set our targets.
When do you think, what season would the council be asked to set the target?
What stage? What stage?
No, what season? Like,
Oh, the end of spring.
right, then we should, I mean, Sean and I give updates to council, but I think they're gonna need a little bit more than just a briefing note. We usually get the briefing note a week ahead. I think you need to set them up for success.
You want to give want the report to be delivered earlier?
No, not, maybe it's more the mayor and I doing there's an opportunity at most committee of the whole where we can do an update on what our committees are doing. Like the sooner they know that there's an expectation that they'll set a target and what that means and the importance. When we set the committee up, they approved the terms of reference, but whether they understood, and it's in there.
Okay.
It's just, we need to be reminded. And I just think I could do that sooner than waiting.
So you recommend this a reminder to the committee that you will have to set targets?
Well, I'll talk to the mayor when he's back and we'll come up with it. It's always a little strategy, that's all.
But this is the issue that I was trying to raise before, was
Right.
when that happens.
Mhm.
And so if we are actually
Yeah.
talking about setting that target after we have done some community consultation, after there is some community encouragement, push to take action, this is crass, hopefully we get wildfire smoke this summer, nothing like that to trigger
Good heat
some
wave.
desire, right? But that's a really critical question. We don't want to go to council and have them have their backs up or not want to do. We really don't. And so,
I saw it at county council when we brought up investing in ground source heat pumps for 100-unit apartment building.
Yep.
There was one council member who didn't believe that heat pumps were,
they don't work in Lanark County.
they don't work. They don't work. So I don't know this. I know some of them. We don't sit and talk about climate change very much together.
Fair enough.
So this is critical, choosing how and when we do this.
Set it up for success
Yeah.
and a bold target.
On that subject, if we could highlight PEI, I know it's kind of not on everyone's radar, but PEI is also not a rich province. It's agricultural. It's not like they've got all of this money to throw away at climate change. They strategically made the assessment that by aiming high and trying to get there 10 years before the rest of the country, it would create industry for them. And they're trying to be on the cutting edge of climate change. And that would be a great strategy for Smiths Falls. Like, this doesn't have to be a sacrifice. This could be like part of the economic development strategy for the town. But that's not going to happen at a 10% reduction. That'll happen if we decide to stand out and show that we're like trying to lean into this and do something special. And honestly, like the things that can be done for climate change are easier to do in a rural space like this. Like us getting down to net zero is going to be so much easier than Toronto trying to do it or Ottawa trying to do it. And like, we have serious advantages in this game as opposed to other, things that a municipality can try to do. And I don't know. I think we should be aggressive with this. I think we should lean in hard.
I completely agree with you. And, for us to be able to go, I have no idea, but can we say, that half the houses in Smiths Falls are eligible for those low income retrofit programs? Those are free. You get free heat pump. Like, can we do that?
Yeah.
That makes an awful lot of sense to me. And to be able to say that it is free, that it's not going to cost you anything, right? And the savings that come out of that are huge. It's huge for the community. So,
Definitely.
yeah.
So going back to the question of the season.
Mhm.
No, I got it. It's sooner rather than later that I say the Royal we want to start working, my colleagues, because they're going, some of them may not agree.
And so what would you advise would be the best season? Like, should we purposely wait until the fall,
Well,
until after summer break? I don't know, Peter, you know?
if we got the Tay Valley response, that would mean a lot. But I don't know. I'll fill out surveys because I care about it.
Mhm. Mhm.
A lot of people in Smith Falls are busy just surviving and struggling, and whether they fill out surveys or are right up on this, I don't know what kind of reaction we get. Groups like REAL are important groups to push and lobby, and libraries and groups like council will need to hear that.
Yeah.
I don't, and I know this is public, I don't know if the leadership will come from council. It may come from the bottom up, council respond. There'll be some members of council, but I think we'd get 4 votes.
I guess
All
those are the
you
public
need.
consultations.
But it'd be nice if it's unanimous.
Yeah.
On the subject of stakeholders, I think to the extent that we can involve children too, like they often are kind of excluded from this, but really like
You mean
this
high
is a
school,
legacy that we're
elementary?
leaving. It's like most of the actions that we do are going to be appreciated by future generations.
Yeah.
And to the extent that we can use like children to help apply pressure to anyone that needs convincing, it's, you know, I think they're a powerful voice for this type of thing.
Interesting.
Were there ever any applications for youth to sit on this committee? Did
I
anybody
believe
come-
I believe there were 3, but I don't know where that left off
Okay.
personally.
I haven't seen any applications. I know there's interest, there is some discussion, but an application has not crossed my desk, and to the best of my knowledge has not crossed the clerk's desk either.
Okay.
Just brainstorming here. You know how there's like Model UN?
Yep.
It would be cool if there was like a panel like this of kids that worked, I shouldn't say kids, but you know what I'm saying? Like if there was like a youth version of this that we coordinated with, and just so it's not, you know, like get the blessing of the next generation that's actually going to have to deal with whether we succeed or fail at this.
I mean, like, if a part of our public consultation to have at least one public house at a high school or something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Once we have our data figured out and we have an approach to how the survey will look, we can figure out where and how the public consultation can happen, and maybe the buy-in will help the council decision.
Great idea.
This committee can meet at the school.
Yeah.
We've had council meetings there.
Yeah, have a
It's
kid, yeah.
very effective.
Post one there, yeah.
Yeah.
It's at 2 o'clock. When does school end?
Yeah.
Is
Alright,
that
maybe
the
we
last
should-
period? I
yeah.
don't know.
Under the communication plan, I guess we could consider that another time, but
It's a nice idea.
Okay. The 2 reports are
If
done.
we
We
have
can do
a
project updates
session, you can look at, the different routes, how much carbon is reduced. So that could become an educational session. And with the kids there, then they get inspired, right? And then provide them with an opportunity to say what they feel. That would be a good engagement session.
Maybe even get them to present to the council and get, have them be ambassadors on this project.
Yeah.
Get a Greta.
Yeah, exactly. Where's our credit?
all the surveys of young people, they're very worried. Their mental health is on this topic.
Yeah.
It's not
Yes.
good.
Yeah, that's a whole other climate anxiety.
Yeah.
Yes, project updates.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so that's where we're at.
Steve had a question. Okay. So project updates. You're still,
Oh, yes.
World Water Day.
Moving ahead of myself.
oh yes, World Water Day.
Yeah, I'd like to comment, at least on record, comment Mary's initiative.
Yeah.
How did the staff feel about March 5th? When the temperature was lower, the lights were dim.
They did it. You'd have to ask the people that were. Richard's still wearing a sweater.
I definitely participated. I know that a lot of people were having that conversation for the first time. I wouldn't say that everyone participated, but at least they were having a conversation, which is good, right? They were thinking, why are we doing this? What do you mean? And that sort of like made people more aware of that there are individual actions, although systematic change is important, individual actions too reminded people that they can participate as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of showed that the town is interested in reducing climate change, even on a small scale.
Interesting.
Water may be a lot tougher because we're surrounded by water. And but if you start focusing on how much water that actually we lost through our pipes and so on because of this, ancient tube pipes and so on.
Well, with the infrastructure changes, I know that, and also the improvements of the water treatment facility, we've actually saved a lot of water since 2019. And so that's what the messaging for March 22nd is all about, is more reminding the community that we have improved in terms of our water retention and our ability to provide clean water for the town.
And I think Mary mentioned last time that maybe they were going to host an open house again, or did I
think the idea was
misheard
floated
that?
around, but I don't
Okay.
know how much upkeep it had from the management table.
Okay.
I just know that in terms of the information, a lot of it came from Jason's team because they were the ones who work at the treatment facility. So that's where the messaging came out when it goes to like the media release and the social media. So that's sort of where it came from.
They're going to produce some videos,
Oh,
a little short. I don't know if TikTok short, but short, and saying this is what the water treatment plant is. This is what we do,
okay.
and this is how we do it, and give people virtual tours, and then also have a barbecue or something.
Oh, that's great.
And when is that supposed to be?
Well, March 22nd is World Water Day, so it'll be that week, which is next week. But I think it was just like, I think they're going to use social media more than,
Yes,
they can't have people going through the plant. It's just not a
not realistic.
Yeah.
secure facility. And
And it's what the 22nd on a Friday, by the way. Just a heads up for you guys if you weren't aware.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's next Friday. Mm-hmm.
We did have some open house.
yeah, he probably is planning an open house. I haven't seen the details.
You had a question, Sue?
I know. I apologize in advance. And I don't mean to go down a whole big path here, but there is the issue of adaptation. And do we as a committee start to talk about issues of, for example, flooding, urban flooding?
In Smith Falls or just in general? Sorry.
In Smith Falls. And what actions can or should we be talking about in terms of the climate action plan?
Okay.
I don't mean, as I said, to open that discussion completely right now, but just to put it on the agenda for down the road in terms of water.
That's a good question. I don't know what the lifetime, what happens after the climate action plan is done. I don't know if it's just like you create a plan and we just move on to the next project. I'm not quite sure. I can see us having a capacity to talk about issues like that, especially when it comes to messaging.
And truthfully, I'm sorry I hadn't connected on this before, but there is actually staffing help around the issue of adaptation.
Yeah, this talent capacity grant we did actually apply for,
Right. Okay.
but we didn't actually get it.
Right.
Unfortunately, mainly because there's a lot of applicants and they're looking at adaptation. So for example, if there was a specific issue like say flooding, and we're looking at having staff focus on trying to make more resiliency, that's where they could help. But because our climate action plan is really just on getting the data and getting materials together for when we create the plan, we weren't necessarily seen as the most eligible. So that's why we weren't able to get the grant.
I'm glad you raised it as an issue. I'm kind of obsessed with biochar as a solution. That's kind of going to be a common theme in a lot of what I talk about. But the biochar is one of the things that people love about it is it's used for for flooding mitigation because it's wonderful at retaining water and it can radically improve flood resistance at the same time that you're sequestering carbon. So the two can go like that. And so I see no reason why we wouldn't include like responding to the threats of flooding as part of our climate change mitigation. And beyond that, also like soils themselves flux greenhouse gases, and like especially like our wet soils around the locks, those are huge methane producers. So to the extent that we're monitoring that and trying to amend that and deal with that, I think that could be a huge part of how we mitigate our greenhouse gas footprint. So I think it makes a lot of sense to focus on soil and flood mitigation.
It's good.
I focus on mitigation. I know the emergency planning team for the town has shifted to climate as one of the biggest threats. We used to just look at train derailment but it's all their tabletop exercises have included tornadoes or those more sudden storms. It's flooding. I'm a lay person, but our town is less at risk to flooding because we're so well controlled, the damming, but it'll be the rain, those sudden just fill everybody's basement, and those are the flooding. It's likely not the river overflowing. But
That makes sense.
It's good to know, Peter. It really is.
Yeah,
I wondered about that. Yeah.
tornadoes, I heard them talk about it. It's I'm a backup to the mayor on that committee.
So you're saying tornadoes are more likely now?
Pardon me?
Are you saying tornadoes are more likely now in the region?
Where?
Tornadoes are more likely in the region?
Well, yes. And the other extreme heat is the
makes
one
sense.
that's going to kill that is killing people.
That would make sense.
Public health.
Yeah, there's a big link there with adaptation for public health as well, like just especially with equity deserving groups that, don't have, some of the older houses don't have air conditioning. And so when there's a heat event and it's getting to cooling centers, how do you reach these people? So it's all connected, eh?
Yep.
I guess that could be a next
heat pumps.
focus.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it is. Yeah.
I guess that could be the next focus for the committee, just like the emergency, what is it called? Emergency plan? Is that it?
Yeah, it's the emergency management
Emergency
committee.
management committee?
The
Oh,
fire chief is the chair.
fair enough.
It's all the senior. They've got two. The station is right here in the event of an emergency, and they have a backup if this building failed
Interesting.
at the water treatment plant or the wastewater plant. I'm not sure which one. And public health is a key part of that.
Part of the reason I'm raising it is because that is where the feds are going
Mitigation.
and funding opportunities. So if we can be doing, the appropriate amount of talking about adaptation, then we may set ourselves up for some funding. So.
Carl.
Without getting too far ahead of ourselves, the fifth and final milestone of that the group will be looking at through the Partners of Climate Protection is monitoring the climate action plan we have, and the terms of reference that have been approved by council for this group focus on advising the guiding and creation of the climate action plan. But what a lot of municipalities are looking at doing and sort of assessing is, well, what sort of role is there for a climate protection working group or an environmental advisory committee or what have you? What sort of role is there moving forward to keep our hands on the pulse and just look at what the next steps are, and do we need to change anything? Do we provide general advice for council? Are there programs that we want to supervise? Do we want those are conversations that a lot of municipalities are having as they kind of move into the next step following the active planning process. So certainly these are conversations that this group and council can have in the coming years.
Thank you.
Good. Yep.
Was that it for World Water Day?
Yes, that's everything.
Okay, so project updates. Number 1, climate action plan, transportation data.
Okay, so I've talked briefly about our options in terms of assessing the transportation data. And as we discussed, I could look and see if Clean Air Partnership is looking at, say, extrapolating data from a previous year to see if we can still use it. Or I guess the feasibility of using fuel cells just from our conversation. It's looking unlikely considering that the data may not be completely accurate given our geography. And Calibrates is the company that has the fuel cells data, just for clarity. And the next thing would be to create a survey for emission reductions. And when it comes to any sort of like public facing survey, this will have to be filtered through the communication team. Now, the town recently hired Joanne as the new person for the communications, and I guess the communications person, because I think there's only one person right now. So once the communication plan is revised, then I'll be seeing Joanne to give more detail in terms of what to change, for example, just so that it kind of fits in line with what the town is promoting. So I wanted your guys, I guess, opinion on it, and then once it's changed, then I'll see what the communication person will say.
And Richard, just a question, will that communications person also do the web content for this group, or is that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So typically for every department, there's one person that does web content. Right now, with our planning clerk soon to be leaving on the 22nd, there should be another person who would be helping with the web content. But in the interim, since I'm the staff person for this committee, I'd be the one creating the web content. I'd be going on to the website. Whether it be me putting on the website is a different story, but I'd definitely be the one coming up with the content. So I'd be the same person creating the climate action page on the town page and producing content for that page.
Okay, great. We're gonna be busy.
Yes. No doubt about it.
So is Mary not? Did you say Mary's moving on?
Oh, yes, that was supposed to be. Sorry.
Oh. Okay, we'll just move on.
Later.
We'll move on.
Later.
Okay.
Speaking of moving on, I'm sorry, I have to go to Brock. For a meeting.
Okay.
Wow.
Leaving now?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought we might get finished, but
Yeah, that's fine.
we're close,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Peter.
Yeah.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Okay, moving
Any
on.
wise words before you leave us?
Wise words.
Are you going to the health unit?
No, I'm going to Brockville Town Hall
Oh, good.
about the health unit.
There you go.
We're selling the merger concept.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Shouldn't
interesting.
say selling.
Yeah. Well.
We're consulting with
Yes.
other municipalities, so.
See you,
thank you.
Peter.
Drive
Thank
safe.
you, Peter.
Bye-bye. Okay.
So we're done for the updates.
That's it. And grant monitoring. Did you have anything to?
So far, nothing at this time. So Orca, they have something called a communications engagement strategy. So essentially, it's like this sort of, it's not open yet, but it will be down the road in the year. So I'm waiting on updates on that. But essentially, what the grant will do is it will give us skill or other tools in terms of how to disseminate this information and get public engagement. So my hope is that it opens, say around the spring, but that when we're ready with the data, we can sort of take advantage of that grant and hopefully use it before the year is out.
Interesting.
Yeah, but nothing in stone yet, nothing confirmed. Yeah. So now it's the
Okay. Great. So round table. Who would like to start?
Okay. We being Climate Network Lanark, we're developing our series under the broader banner of Electrify Lanark. And so that's going to be a series of workshops focused on residential electrification, basically, of everything. But the key thing that we're planning is a forum on May the 18th. So do mark that down. And this is broadly motivated by the question that we keep getting in the public, which is where is all this electricity going to come from that we need to make this big transition, okay? And so that's rooted in some misunderstanding of the existing system. And then also, what is going to provide the electricity. So that's what our forum is going to address in Lanark County and Smiths Falls. And so we are looking at the issue of supply. So we'll have the IESO, we'll have people talking about solar and renewables and also storage. And there have been, if you've been following it at all, some community efforts that have shut down utility scale batteries in the region out of true misunderstanding of those issues, right? And so hopefully we have one going ahead in Mississippi Mills. These utility scale batteries are critical to being able to take advantage of renewable power, right? You got to produce when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, and then you want to store the power, right, to be able to use it at other times when it's not running. And also you want to be able to have that stored power from other sources too, to be able to use when needed. So we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at smaller scale distributed power. So what you can do on a very small neighborhood basis to, again, have backup power supply from things like EVs and be able to provide power to your neighbors, right, if you're in a shortage, which is quite possible in terms of the issues of adaptation too, right? Because we have more storms, that sort of thing. So that's what we're looking at in that day. And we've got some high-level speakers coming. So people like Ralph Torrey, Art Hunter, Steve Lapp. So they're all going to be looking at this on a larger scale, but narrowing down to what is going to happen for us right here in Lanark County and Smiths Falls. So it'll be a day. You're all invited.
Sorry, I missed that. Sue, who's hosting the forum?
Climate Network Lanark.
Perfect, thank you.
And is it free to attend, or is there a registration fee?
We're just figuring that out right now. We are making every effort to try to make sure that it is free. We might have to charge a small fee just for lunch, basically. So,
Would that be also we broadcasted Zoom and so on?
Yes, it'll be hybrid. Yep. So, but we are trying to encourage everybody to be there physically, just because it's, the interaction is so much better, right? When you can ask questions directly of the speakers. Right? So, yeah.
Have you guys calculated how much of Lanark's power is currently carbon neutral?
Of the supply.
Yeah.
So it is no different really from whatever Hydro One is. We have that little piece in Almont, which is Ottawa Valley Power. And that's hydro. But that just goes into the grid, right? So we're no different than the whole of Ontario. We could have a discussion about where the province of Ontario is going, how it's adding natural gas and increasing.
I just mean, like, in terms of the pie chart, what I sent a list of questions earlier. I guess we're going to try to get back to it in the next meeting. But in terms of like trying to model, like, if we were to, for instance, get the hydroelectric plant working, like we have an abandoned hydroelectric plant downtown. Right now, because so much of our power comes from hydro and from nuclear and wind from Kingston and solar, like it's less than 5% of our power that is currently coming from natural gas. By some estimates, I've seen it's less than 1%, but that range of between 5% and 1% is enormous. And it's, power diffuses once you get it on the grid, but geography matters. Like where we're actually consuming, burning fossil fuels is relevant. And I've just, through my own research, I asked them to see if they could chase down that data. But I've been trying to chase it down on my own, and I found it's challenging.
I'm confused about what data you're talking about.
Like the number, the pie chart of how when we turn on a light bulb in Smiths Falls, how much, if that's 100 watt light bulb, how many watts are coming from fossil fuels? If it's
the
5,
same as Ontario.
But do you have that number?
Oh,
is it 5%? Is it 1%?
Top of my head.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying now.
It's because it's really relevant.
I think it's in Bob's climate lens. I think so.
Because the number, like I'm just going to dive down a math geek rabbit hole for a second. But when you're trying to, like, as a community becomes more and more green and becomes more carbon neutral, there's a diminishing return on investment. And so, like, if if your town is running entirely on diesel generators, every solar panel you put up is pulling power directly from something that would have otherwise been a diesel generator. Once half your town has solar panels, that return has been cut in half, and every additional solar panel you add is only shrinking your carbon footprint half as much as it was originally. So, like, the closer you get to carbon neutral, the less return on investment you get. And so, like, different municipalities have different opinions in terms of, like, at what point is the diminished return no longer relevant? And, like, I think above like 80%, it starts to get like really hard to make an economic argument for creating more, but if we're at 95% or 98%, suddenly, like, fixing that hydroelectric station might not make sense anymore, because the power that we're producing was being made by solar and wind or nuclear or water. It wasn't being made through natural gas. So, like, the amount of natural gas used when we consume electricity is really relevant to the exercise that we're doing and all of the modeling that we're talking about. Same with the, like, trying to do calculate the waste treatment. Like, almost all of that waste treatment is electricity. And if it turns out that, 99% of our electricity is carbon neutral, that's going to, as opposed to 95%, that's going to be a 5-fold decrease in the amount of carbon we have to shrink, right? Like, these numbers on the margin are enormously relevant to our actual carbon footprint.
I guess I would come at that from a different take. I mean, 60% of our electricity in Ontario is from nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
We know that Ontario is increasing the amount of electricity that's going to come from natural gas. That broadly is just a mistake, right? Especially when we can be doing more from renewables yet. Lanark, Leeds, and Grenville is the solar capital of Ontario. We can be doing more solar here. We know that, right? If we can have more battery storage and, water storage. I mean, the potential of the new water tower here to be a storage system for energy is fabulous, right?
Agreed, yeah.
And maybe that's a better investment than getting the old dam going. Mm-hmm. I don't know, right? But I think it's worth the calculation. But anyway, so the point being that we know broadly that we should be getting away from fossil fuels, right? And we should be turning towards renewables. So that's enough for me. I don't need to get into the finer detail because it's all Southern Ontario.
Agreed. I guess, like, in terms of
we're all Hydro One.
Yeah, but in terms of, like, a public policy, it doesn't make sense for us to spend money putting up a hydroelectric thing if 98% of our power is green already. But it might very well make sense for us to lobby the provincial government to shut down the one stupid power plant that's providing the 2% of our carbon. You know what I mean? Like, it might be that we are at a place. Yeah.
And because we're going to be adding natural gas, I mean, that is insane, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when we have the capacity for renewables.
You're worried about that.
Agreed.
And we have the capacity for battery storage. And the IESO right now is contracting for battery storage and contracting for more renewables. So this is good. This is a good trend, right? That I just think we should be encouraging.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Richard.
No, that's good. I like a little nerd out myself. No worries.
A quick update. The mini forest, the forest floor will be put down on Saturday, April the 13th. And we're looking for volunteers. Capacity, we're looking for 60 people. And at this point here, there are service club signing up and so on. I thought that would be great if you have a couple of reps from this committee and there, right? The other thing is perhaps along the line, if we could, we'd be planting 300 trees in this 100-meter area. If we could start calculating how much carbon are we going to take off? And then also with biochar, what additional stuff? And if we use those data for those type of occasions, it would be great. Yeah. And again, these sort of things could be re-prophesized during Paddle Fest. Paddle Fest, we're modifying it so that now the racing is in the morning, so that the whole afternoon and evening will be devoted to all the other things. And it may be a good time to actually hand out the survey
Yeah,
or talk about that.
for sure.
Right? Yeah. So
We'll
we have a few
cross-pollination.
months down the road for that.
Yep. Where is the mini forest, Peter?
Chamber,
Corbett Park.
yeah,
Sorry?
Corbett Park.
Corbett.
Corbett Park, yeah. And Corbett Park is now on Google Map.
Yes.
It wasn't there before.
Oh no, I didn't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
So if anybody's interested, Peter, should they just contact you? Anybody from this committee interested in?
What I would actually is Dave Thornhill. I will send a flyer to Mary, right? So that you know. But we want to identify. We are from the Climate Prevention Committee.
Right.
okay.
And also there was another thing here is we were trying to get butternut, tree butternut.
Oh, like the
Couldn't
plants?
find any. But for some reason, REC has it, but have to get the okay of the municipality before they will proceed. Did anybody contact you on that?
Nobody's contacted
All right,
me, but it may come through our community services department that manages the parks.
Okay, I'll get in touch with you. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Steve, do you have anything? I feel like I've ignored you for a little bit. Is he there? Is he frozen?
Maybe he's frozen. He looks
Yeah.
frozen.
It's frozen.
Okay, if you can hear us, Steve, if you have anything to contribute for updates, perhaps you can just email it to the committee and we'll make sure it gets in the minutes. Nate,
And
do you have anything?
And Nate, what about the competition to minimize methane?
Oh, we haven't heard back yet. We'll get a methane. Yeah. So we're in the methane challenge, but I'll have an update for that in like a month or two.
Okay.
Was there anything further from
Not from me, but
Carl?
So unfortunately, I do have a staffing update for the committee. Mary Remig, our planning clerk and recording secretary, has resigned from the town. She's taken a very attractive position in another municipality. So certainly on behalf of all of us, we're sorry for her, sorry for the town, and she's recognized the huge amount of work and her contributions. Happy for her future opportunities, but the recruitment for planning clerk is underway. That position closes the same day as Mary's last day, which is March 22nd. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to fill that position and have a new person join this group in the coming weeks.
Great. Oh,
So can I ask where she is going? And I respect it is a loss. I've worked with her at Tay Valley, right? So yes. Anyway.
So I'll probably best let her clarify that. I'm not sure what the protocol is in terms of communicating that is.
okay. Any other comments or questions?
I have a question, and I don't know if it's relevant for this committee. It's in the context of trees. So there's a whole area along William West that's been cut down.
William West.
Yeah. What's going on there?
And so is it on like the municipal right of way, or is it on someone's private property?
I guess it's private property.
It's
It's along the roadside.
Where those?
It looks
Between
like there's
Garden Market and the Real Deal.
it looks like there's been clearing on private property. I don't have a development application. I don't know of any plans.
Is it the one across from the apartments that have the solar panels?
Next to the garden market?
Oh, on that side, yes. I'm not familiar.
Yeah.
Sure.
Nothing's crossed my desk. I'm not aware. I'm not sure if it was just maintenance or if there were any
It's a
plans.
lot has been cut.
Hmm.
Is that, I don't, it's been ages since I've looked at the town's tree bylaw. Is there any protection for existing mature trees?
Not on private property. So unless there's a development application that came forward, then we would have had more say. But so far, they're able to do what they want to do, unfortunately. Yeah.
Interesting. Because I think that's, if I recall, that, I mean, it's been years, but that area is so narrow, right? And it backs right onto the swale that I don't think there's the capacity for any construction right there.
Open space, wetlands, unlikely, but we don't know the concept for the development, so I don't know what they're doing.
Or if there is one.
Yeah, so we can't really say if it's appropriate or not because we don't have any more information.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll recommend the motion to adjourn the meeting at 4:04. Moved by Nate, seconded.
Oh, sure.
Sue, all in favor? Okay,
And thank you guys.
thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
And next meeting is April 9th.